Welcome to Navigating Advocacy, the true crime podcast that goes beyond storytelling to ignite change and seek justice. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Whitney. As true crime enthusiasts turned passionate advocates, we've seen the power of storytelling raise awareness about unsolved crimes and bring hope to victims and their families. We hope to inspire action and promote positive change within the true crime community.
Our mission is simple. We provide a platform for victims and their families to share their stories, to be heard, and find solidarity. But we don't stop there. We offer practical guidance to our listeners on how they can actively make a difference in their own communities.
In each episode, we'll discuss a different unsolved case. We'll examine the details, highlight potential leads, and strive to spark new interests that may help advance the investigation. Our goal is to reignite hope and ultimately bring justice where it's long overdue.
But this podcast is about more than just a conversation. It's about building a community of like-minded individuals who share a common purpose, making a real difference in the fight for justice. Whether you're a seasoned true crime fan or new to the genre, we invite you to join us on this journey of discovery and advocacy.
Together, we can create a wave of change. We're here to empower you to also become advocates for change, no matter where or who you are. We are Navigating Advocacy.
We discuss topics that may be sensitive to listeners. Discretion is advised. Brownwood is a small town in West Texas that has had its share of corruption over the years. Even back in the 1990s, when Leon Laureles, the victim in today's case, worked at a local Kroger's grocery store, it wasn't any better. I'm not hating on small Texas towns, but this one surely takes the cake. Racism, homophobia, and illegal acts happening from normal residents all the way up to the county attorney make this a place most people wouldn't want to step foot in. Then we add a group of locals called the Brownwood Mafia. Makes this town seem like something out of a movie. However, this is real life for Leon's niece, Arlene, and the rest of his family, who has been fighting to not only find out who killed her uncle, but to hold those in power accountable for their parts in the decades-old mishandling of this cold case. Here's Arlene speaking about the close relationship she and her uncle had.
Leon was my uncle, although he was 2.5 years older than me. We were very close because his siblings were a lot older and mine were a lot younger. So it basically was just him and I. And we grew up together. We played in the high school band together. We went dancing together. We were just pretty much always together because both of our parents just kind of left us to ourselves. So it was just him and I. And he always protected me. He was always there for me. He always took care of me. He took care of everyone. He took care of his sick parents. And then he took care of me and then my children. And so he was just such a loving, kind, giving person and just always wanted to take care of everyone. And everybody who knew him loved him. I haven't heard one single person say a bad word about him. They all say he was so wonderful. He was so sweet, kind, loving. He was a good friend, a good coworker. And so at the time Leon was killed, I feel like he was just learning to live his life for himself. He didn't have anyone to take care of anymore. He could be himself. And so he was wanting to come out and started seeing someone. And that's what hurts me the most, that his life was just starting and it was taken away from him. He didn't get to live his life with the person he loved or do things like buy a house and get married and have children. None of those things, because some selfish person took him away. And my children didn't get to really know their uncle, my grandchildren, because I know that they would have loved him and he would have loved them. So a lot was taken away. When a person is murdered, it's not just one person that suffers, it's everyone. Everyone that he worked with, everyone that loved him, every family member. Our lives are just completely wrecked. They're torn apart. And then that's something that you can't replace. You can't just get over. And time does not heal all wounds because the wound is still there. And it's just as raw as it was that day. And he was such a beautiful person. And that tears me up because he could have done wonderful things with his life. And there could have been so many more people that would have loved him. So I miss him terribly every single day.
Did he have like hobbies or what was he into?
Yes, since he had to take care of his parents, he started cooking for them at an early age. So cooking was his path. And of course, Mexican and pork, he made up his own, but every single one was just amazing. And too bad he didn't write them down so I can recreate them.
Mhm.
But everything he made was wonderful. He loved cooking and he loved music and dancing. So he saved up his money and got one of those like disco music boxes with the lights and everything. And we would just play music and be silly and dance. And then when we got older, when we were teenagers, we went to the local dance hall and every Saturday, once a month. And him and I would just dance, even though everybody was like old people.
That's what I was going to say. Isn't that usually an older crowd? That's awesome.
Because we were such a small town. There was no clubs or bars or anything like that. That was the only place we could go to dance. So that's what we did.
Tell us about the town, the kind of vibe of the town at the time.
The town was pretty small. It was very conservative. Most people are Catholic, as we were. There wasn't a lot of Hispanic or Black people in our town. I didn't know any different. And his parents didn't teach us Spanish because they wanted us to not be made fun of in school. So we never learned Spanish. And both of us were very shy. So he didn't have a whole lot of friends. Plus, he was always taking care of his parents or his nieces and nephews. So he didn't socialize a lot now, which is pretty sad. He really missed out on a lot during his childhood and teenage years, but he never once complained. He was always with a smile. I never heard him yell. I never heard him be mad or say anything ugly to anyone. He just took it in stride and made the best of what he had. And that's just the type of person he was.
You said his siblings were quite a bit older than him, and obviously his parents were quite a bit older, and that's why he was left to take care of. But it seems like he had that taking care of nature anyways, so he would have done it regardless of birth order.
Exactly. That's exactly who he was. He was always taking care of everyone. Didn't even have to ask him. He just fell into that role. That was who he was.
Did his siblings and his nieces and nephews, you guys all lived in that small town, or did they move off?
When Leon was born, the sibling closest to him was about 15 years old.
Okay.
His oldest brother had already moved out of the house and was in college, married, and then the second oldest was also out of the house, and my mother too. So the first three siblings were already out of the house. And the other ones were in high school and they were doing things. So he was the one left to clean the house, cook, and pick up medications and take him to doctor's appointments. So he had to drive when he was 14 years old all the way to Dallas for dialysis. Yeah, because we didn't have one in our town.
Leon was having some issues the few days leading up to his murder, correct? Can you start talking about that? Like what he said about that, how that happened? Does anybody even know who this was that he was having issues with?
Yeah, he was a very private person. So for him to talk about being scared must have been a really big deal. Like he had to be terrified. He told a couple of coworkers that somebody was threatening him and he was scared, but he didn't know why. He didn't name names to those people, but a couple of days prior to his death, he told his sister Lily, that one that was closest in age to him, that the brothers were after him, but he didn't know why. So he actually named names then. They call them the brothers. And so one reached out and on one of our posts. And so a friend asked him if he wanted to be interviewed by us. And he said he was already interviewed by the police back then. And he doesn't have anything to add. We're like, oh, okay. No one's ever mentioned that you were questioned. They were really awful people. They were dealing drugs and always hurting people and have legal guns, but they never really got in trouble. And now we know why. But yeah, if you ask anybody, people are still afraid of them now. They still live there. They're still afraid of them. And that's why people don't speak up, because they're really terrible.
So that was like the days leading up to his murder. And then can you tell us about that specific day? What happened? Where was he going? Where was he? That type of thing.
Leon worked the graveyard shifts, and he started doing that because he was watching my kids during the day. And so he worked the graveyard shift, and he just stayed. Once my kids got older, he just stayed at the graveyard shift. And he was a person who was always early. So he left his house at 11:30. He got to the Kroger parking lot about 11:45. One of his coworkers looked out the window, and she did see his car out there and another car parked next to his. And he had a particular place that he parked every time. And she did notice that he was not parked in his usual space. She just said, oh, yay, Leon's here, and then went back to work. And then when 12:01 came and he hadn't come inside the store, she looked outside and his car wasn't there anymore. And she thought that was weird. So she immediately called my Uncle George, is who Leon was living with at that time. And so George got up and he went down the path that Leon takes to see if maybe something happened to the car accident, car broke down. He didn't see him. He got all the way to the Kroger parking lot, went all the way back home. And as he got home, the coworker called again and said that she called 911. And they told her that there was a car accident. And that's when she saw the fire truck pass by as she's on the phone with him. But they said it was a car accident. So they assumed that it wasn't Leon. And then just, I don't know, 15 minutes later is when she learned that was Leon.
So in that car accident wasn't on the path that Leon would typically take. It was okay. Oh, wow.
And I can understand why they thought it was a car accident, because the car was on fire. They
Yes.
Body next to it.
Yeah. How old was Leon at this point?
He was 30. He had just turned.
I don't want to go back, but I also didn't want to interrupt your questioning. What is the connection between Leon and the brothers? What was there ever? He says that he thinks they're out to get him, but did they work together? Did they go to high school together? Did they, I don't know, did he trip over him in the grocery store? What was the connection between the two?
From what I understand, the brothers would go into the store during Leon's midnight shift and they would steal items and they would threaten him. And then one day, one of his coworkers said that he stood up to them and said that he wasn't going to let them do that anymore because he was going to report them. I don't know if that's what started it. They were also like the big time drug dealers in town. And because the town was small, the parties were usually at somebody's house or out at the lake or something like that. And Leon was starting to come out and he was wanting to party and stuff. So I feel like they may have met there. And I don't know what transpired, but for some reason, they wanted him dead. I know that one of the brothers was like super homophobic and he made it very clear. He hated Mexicans is what he called them. So there could be multiple reasons why they were after him.
Oh, so Leon's body was found next to the vehicle.
It was found like about 10 feet in front of his car. Okay. He was at the line to the gun range.
And because Melissa wasn't there with us the day you took me and Haley out there, as well as the other people for the memorial, she doesn't quite have a image of what's out there. It's off of a major road, a highway, if you will.
Okay.
But you can only see when you turn left to turn into the gun range, really all is the gun range. You have to turn back towards the left to go what looks like a turnaround to go under a bridge, but it doesn't ever actually turn around. There is train tracks that go underneath the bridge, and it sits down below the level of the highway. So you can't really see anything from the highway unless you pull over and like really look. So the fact that
Gotcha.
the car is on fire is really the only thing that drew attention to anyone even knowing something was down there, especially at night. There's no lights out there. There is nothing. And it's not even a gravel road. I don't know how the people in small cars got down there. When I went down there in my 4Runner, I was nervous people were going to get stuck in some of the divots that are in down this little section.
Oh, wow.
And when it does flood down there, so people have gotten stuck down there when we go for a memorial.
Wow. Brothers have anything to do with that gun range, or is that just like a random location?
Yeah. Speaking to the town people, I have come across people that have told me they used to party there and saw in there. So that was like their party spot every weekend. So yes, that place was well known to them, but not the rest of us in town. I had no idea it existed.
So did they know what caused the vehicle fire? Was there accelerants?
The only thing that law enforcement told us that because of the fire and the water putting the fire out, there would be no evidence, so the car was destroyed within the next day. But the way the car was, like, it was completely burned, every single piece of it. And so there had to be a lot of accelerant put on the car for it to be that damaged. It went
and that quickly because they got there relatively fast.
Yeah, the 911 call came at, like, I believe at 12:15. So there wasn't much time in between when he left Kroger to the 911 call. So they had to put accelerant on it because it was already engulfed. And somebody reached out to me and they said that their mom was an LVN just getting off of work at that time. And she's the one that saw the car on fire. And she went down and she saw Leon's body. And her daughter, she was a nurse, so she went down there. It was in the car.
See if she could help.
She said that it was one of the worst things that, that she kept going over because she couldn't save him. And so I know that broke my heart for her. But yeah, just because she couldn't save him and she didn't know what else to do, it was really heartbreaking for her.
We didn't talk about this a little bit ago, but Leon drove an 88 Thunderbird, so an actual car, not an SUV, not a pickup truck, a car. And also, the fire has nothing to do with Leon's death other than potentially covering something up, because Leon was found shot with a gun, execution style. So even if someone was at the gun range, there was a ricochet, it was an accidental situation. There's no way it could have been the way it was, the way he was found.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my next question because I was like, I knew that he was shot. So he's outside. Did they find any evidence like gun casing or gun shell casing, anything like that outside of the vehicle? Because that would be the only type of evidence they could get.
Exactly. And that's what I've been fighting for 15 years to get some records or autopsy reports so that I could know, because they've never told us anything. So we recently got one page of the autopsy report, and it said that he was probably kneeling and they executed him from like the back to the front. And he had his hands like this. So the bullet was lodged in his thumb. So that's something we never knew. So, we're like, okay, where's this bullet? They gave it to the sheriff and then it's lost. Yeah, they told us that they didn't have his records because it was lost in a flood. And I looked it up and I'm like, what flood are you talking about? There hasn't been a flood since 2001.
Right after that, like the family gets notified because they know that night that it's Leon. What's happening with the investigation right away? Is it all just hush, nobody saying anything? Or Does it look like they're trying to solve it at that first initial point?
I I was young and I was not even we come from a small town and we respect law enforcement. So we didn't think to ask more questions. Also, the person in charge was Bobby Grubbs. He's a Texas Ranger. He didn't believe women had any part in it. Me, my mom, my aunt, and my cousin, we all had to stay outside the sheriff's department in the dark. And they only spoke to my Uncle George. So he would go in, talk to them, and he'd come out and relay some messages to us. But I feel like he didn't tell us everything because he wanted to protect us. So I don't know all of the information that was taking place, but I do know that very morning I have the actual newspaper clipping that shows all of them standing literally on the spot where Leon was. They didn't have booties on. They didn't have gloves on. They didn't look like they were investigating anything. There was just chit-chatting with the person across the fence that was the owner of the gun range. And they knew each other very well because they were all in the Brownwood Mafia together. And he also ran the funeral home. So it just didn't look like there was ever any investigation done. And they certainly didn't want to tell us anything, especially not the females in the family. I was never questioned or spoken to, not once, because he lived with me the longest and we were very close and I wasn't even questioned.
Yeah. You think that they would
Yeah.
speak with you to find out if he had any enemies. You said Brownwood Mafia. Is that just like a local gang?
I don't think I would call it a gang. It's a group of businessmen in town that Groner Pitts created just for the wealthier people, the men only. And they pretty much ran the whole town. They were in charge of everything. It's that kind of a group. But they're very proud of it. On many newspaper articles that they were interviewed for, they mentioned it every time. They were so proud of it. And they still are there today. And it's basically a lot of the men are Howard Payne University. That's very racist. So they were pretty proud of that too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Got a lot going on in that town.
I can say there really is a lot. It's hard to keep it all tracked in mind, but there is so many things wrong with that town. I don't even know if I could list them all. It's just crazy, especially since I take it to Facebook and podcasts. More people are hearing about it because nobody even knew about Leon when I started. And so a lot of people have reached out to me and told me because I'm gay, they'll stop me for anything if I'm going 1 mile over the speed limit. And they'll find something to arrest me for. I don't know, your light is out, your tags are about to expire, whatever. So there's a lot of fear in that town just for being gay and also being Hispanic. And it's happening to this very same day right now. And one person said that because he was gay, he was taken in for questioning, but then he was handcuffed and beat so severely that they broke both of his arms while in custody. Another person reached out to me and said that their uncle was taken in for questioning as well. And he died. They said it was a suicide, but that he had hung himself on the shower in his cell. First of all, there's not a shower in their cell.
Yeah.
How would that have happened? And so when they got the autopsy report, it showed that he had multiple injuries all over his body, which he didn't have prior to that, but they claimed it was a suicide. And there's lots of cases like that. People reaching out to me. And that town is so corrupt. It's so awful. And I fear for the people there in Brownwood, especially if you're gay or Hispanic.
Even when we were there for the memorial and when we walked those streets during that Cinco de Mayo festival, you could see it. People were looking at us strange, staring at you like, what are you doing? Why would you bring attention to yourself for this situation? A lot of people wouldn't even accept the flyers we were handing out. It was like an interesting vibe.
Some people wouldn't even make eye contact with us.
Holy moly. That
Yeah.
is, you
Yeah.
just don't think that there's still places like this
I know.
today.
I was so surprised, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that it's exactly the same as it was." And I can't even imagine the fear that Leon felt just going out every single day, just going to the store, and how he was harassed and bullied. I can't even imagine. It breaks my heart because he was the type of person, he's always protecting me. So he wouldn't have told me if those things were happening to him, because he wouldn't want to upset me. And so I didn't know what was happening at the time.
He was just trying to protect you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's just there. Like in 2005, there was a new detective, Texas Ranger, put on the case, and then he actually listed there was a person of interest in the case. Did anything come out about that, or did you?
No, nothing's come out. But also I read like on some of the other cold cases, they say those exact same words, like in the 2000, 2001, 2011, they say that, but nothing ever comes from any of them. I feel like they just say that to act like they're working it, but they're not.
Agreed. Yes.
It's a
agreed.
pacifier. It's
Yeah.
a pacifier for families so that you'll quit bugging them. We're working on it. Oh, we're going to put someone new on it. We've got new eyes on it. Those types of conversations.
Yeah, because Bobby Grubbs, he actually said that 2 other times. Like, I'm looking at it and we may have a person of interest, but nothing has ever come from any of that. I've never heard of anybody being arrested or taken in for questioning. So,
That night when police arrived on scene, when the firefighters got out there, put the fire out, realized that Leon was deceased on the scene. And so when it became an actual homicide investigation, that I feel that they removed the vehicle entirely too quickly from the crime scene to have been able to perform an adequate investigation.
yeah, honestly, if you ask me, I don't think they did any investigation. Like I said, they told us immediately that the fire and water would have destroyed any evidence. So they destroyed the car. It was gone within hours. But now we know that there could be some things that would have helped, such as the seat, because Leon was such a tall, big person. He always had the seat all the way back and reclined. And the brothers are short people. So if somebody else was driving his car, you would have been able to tell by the position of his seat. There's little things that could have helped. Losing the bullet, that didn't help. I don't feel like they collected any evidence. And when I asked the records keeper at the sheriff's department if there was anything that could be tested, because I was willing to do that on my own, she didn't say no, but she just said, we've done everything that we can with what we have. So I feel like they didn't keep anything. I don't think they kept his clothing or anything. So I don't.
Or they're not willing to release it to you to give to a private lab. One of the two.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous that they didn't even try.
Even his clothing could have, I don't know, that person's hair or something, that could be tested like that with DNA. So I don't know, because they won't. I don't think they kept it, but they won't tell me yes or no for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that this case won't ever be solved, because there is no actual evidence to test, which is horrible. And I feel like they planned it that way.
Yep.
Back then, they did have a forensic person that would come to crime scenes of murder cases, and they didn't even call that person for Leon's case, even though his car's on fire and he was executed. Like, that'd be the perfect time for the forensic person to come in and pick up evidence. They didn't.
Yeah, and if it is such a small town, they're not overrun with murder. You've got nothing but time, but go do it. That's your job. Wow.
Yeah. The other connection there is to law enforcement is the 911 caller specifically said that there was a red and white pickup truck, flatbed with chrome mirrors that was just behind Leon's car at the time. I just feel, am I still in this nightmare? Because these things seem so unreal.
Yeah, it seems like a
The
movie.
more I dig, the more questioned everything and everybody there.
Yeah.
But the DA would have a copy of the autopsy, so he should have some records. When I called the DA telling him I wanted the autopsy, his exact words to me were, "Why do you want the autopsy? We all know what his demise was." That was his answer to me.
Because there's more information on that than how he died.
I was just like struck without words. I didn't know what to say. I finally got enough courage to say, because I want to know if there was any evidence on his clothing, if there were any shell casings, or were there other injuries to his body other than that one bullet, because the deputy told us that Leon's face was very swollen because he was on an ant bed. And so the funeral director told us not to look at his face, not to look at it. We could touch him, but not look at him at the funeral home. So we didn't. Now I'm questioning, like, I don't think, since you're not a scientist, that you would know what his face would look like on an ant bed once you're dead. But the funny thing is, there's another person who's questionable death. They told that to the family also. How do you excuse to not let the family look at their face?
There must be a lot of ants in Brownwood, Texas.
But
That's what I was about to say. And it's very coincidental. Everyone just happens to die on the ant beds.
And why are you using that excuse for two people when we're questioning their death? But you were there. There's not any ant beds there. But we were dumb, and we were also like, I was completely destroyed.
When this happens to you, these things happen to family members, you're not thinking clearly or objectively. You are grief-stricken. You're just hoping to trust the process because you don't know better than to question the process. And you believe the good in all these people that something's going to happen.
Exactly.
And it takes years to realize that they're doing nothing for you to start asking the questions.
My whole life was so destroyed from that moment, because I don't remember how I drove myself to the sheriff's spot. I don't remember that at all. I don't remember getting dressed. I don't even know what I did with my kids. I remember standing outside in the dark, the sheriff's department. And then I remember when light broke, somebody said that it was already in the newspaper and that he had been executed, but we hadn't been told that yet. So I was angry, like really angry that they would put that out there. So I did drive over there and yell at him, because I wasn't in my mind. I don't remember the next day. I don't remember any of the funeral except touching him when the family was with him because we couldn't look at him. I don't remember the funeral at all because people have asked me, like, who was there. I don't know. It's a complete blank. The only thing else I remember is at the graveside holding onto his casket and bawling because I didn't want to leave him alone. I couldn't bear the thought of him being alone. And because he was my person, he was my best friend, I couldn't leave. They had to pry me away. And then I just remember, like, days after, I just couldn't pull myself together. All I did was cry, and I'd lock myself in the bathroom so my kids wouldn't hear me crying. Those are the only things I remember from that day on. Everything else is a complete blank because my whole life was destroyed. And it still feels that way because there's always that. He's missing during the holidays, which holidays were his favorite time. And he loved cooking and playing music and being silly. And he's missing from my life during those times. So it's really hard. I know it's been 27 years, but it feels just as hard.
Yeah, like you said, there's no time does not heal all wounds. No. Oh, gosh.
What are you getting now from law enforcement? Some of these people surely have aged out of the system as far as their jobs. People aren't willing, the new people that have come in are not willing to crack open these cases.
Yeah, I feel like there's this, I don't know, code or something that they have where they are sticking to the same story. So they don't really give me much. I did talk to the most recent local Texas Ranger. And what I did find interesting about his comments were that the people that were questioned that night that were, what did he call them? I'm sorry, I'm blanking at words. People that were possibly there, that they were too intoxicated and high, that they were not credible witnesses. And I'm like, okay, first of all, what group of people are you talking about? Were people there? Were they partying? Were they just watching? I don't understand this. And he wouldn't go into further detail. He just said that they were intoxicated, so they're not good, credible sources. And we know that they possibly can be. Let them sober up. And I'm sure that whenever you see somebody being murdered, you're not going to forget that whether you're drunk or high or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I find that very odd, but it was just another way to tell me that it won't be solved because there's no credible witnesses. Like, I don't even understand what you're.
Yeah. Another excuse.
Exactly.
In the photo that was printed in the newspaper with the sheriff there that you were talking about, I pulled it up to look at. Who is the person in the jersey?
I believe that's the owner of the gun range. Either that's the owner or his son.
I find it very strange that they're all basically contaminating this crime scene. They're just walking all over everything. And he's allowed to be there for that?
Yeah. Legally, he's not supposed to be there because he owns that property.
Yeah, because he should be questioned.
So I don't know what's happening there. But if you look at this newspaper article, you cannot find it. It's only out there because I have it. I personally have it and put it out there. Otherwise, you can't find basically anything on Leon. It's all wiped out. Like my Facebook was wiped out too.
Yeah, you and I have talked about that when I think a little bit at Leon's memorial, because I've asked for files on it when we first were introduced to you and introduced to Leon's story back when Haley approached us about helping. And we knew we wanted to cover Leon's story for Texas, but it takes us so long to get through the states that it seems like we've known you forever, but we weren't able to get here quick enough. And we've asked for files and we get not even a response.
Yeah. What happened with your Facebook?
Leon's page and my personal Facebook, which just deactivated, deleted. I couldn't even appeal it. I couldn't do anything, along with my messengers and my Instagram. Everything was wiped off completely. And so
how long ago did this happen?
Earlier this year, wasn't it?
I believe it was, early in the year.
Holy crap.
It took me literally like 2 weeks to even make myself feel like I needed to start a new page. I couldn't even muster the energy because I had put so much time, energy, and heartache, and I had a lot of people had reached out to me that was on there that I completely lost now. It was just, I was distraught over it. I wasn't sure I even wanted to start the page again.
Yeah, that's understandable. You don't live in the area anymore, or do you live in that area?
I moved away a few years after Leon was killed. I live like 70 miles away from there. So I only go there for his memorial. I don't go there any other time.
I was wondering if the police or anyone harassed you for all you're doing to fight for Leon.
I'm sure they lived there, but I don't. And I only go here because it's just too hard to go. I basically just go because I have a cross that is there in that area. So I go and put flowers or clean up the area or something, but that's about it.
Yeah, it seems like they only try to be sneaky to harass you in underhanded ways.
Yeah, because the local sheriff now, he actually is following Leon's page. I thought was very weird, but I'm like, oh,
wow.
hey, oh, well, yeah.
What
Interesting.
can our listeners do? Do you have, I believe you used to have a GoFundMe. Is that still for billboards? Is that like the best way that our listeners, if they want to actually help in some way?
Yeah, because basically right now, what I really need is an attorney for legal purposes of getting the entire records and autopsy files, because without a lawyer, I'm not going to get anything. So I still have the GoFundMe. It's not doing well at all, but I still have it there. And that's basically for that reason, for me to hire an attorney. As far as the billboard goes, A Season of Justice paid for 1 year for me to have it. And so in September, that ends. It'll be a year now. I've only got
Oh,
one
wow.
that reached out to me because she said she drives by it every day. And it finally got to her that she knew one of the people that murdered Leon, she claims. And
Oh,
because she knew this and it was eating at her, seeing the billboard every day, she finally came forward.
Did she tell you or did she tell law enforcement or both?
She told me. And it took her a long time to come out with it because she's still very scared.
Sure.
Also in a gay relationship, and so she gets harassed all the time, so she's even more scared, and I completely understand that. I'm like, "I don't want you to put yourself in danger. I won't use your name." But she told me her best friend's boyfriend was out there,
mm,
and he didn't pull the trigger, but he was there when it happened, and it had really eaten him up to the point where he said that Leon was haunting him. He would wake up in the middle of the night screaming that Leon's right there and he won't leave, he won't leave. So then he went to like devil worshiping, trying to get Leon's spirit out because he was that haunted by what happened, but he never did come forward.
And
wow.
unfortunately, there's no police to police the police.
Yeah, who do you go to? I really don't. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, at this point, I know that Leon's case won't be solved, but what I want personally is for law enforcement to be held accountable for Leon's case, not investigating properly, not taking the proper protocols, along with the other unsolved cases there, because they are exactly the same from like the next day. It was already cold because they're not investigating it. The Amanda Goodman, that she was only 13, was executed too. It's insane.
It's insane. And I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with this.
Yeah. Yes, I'm trying to make something good come out of this. I'm trying to start a nonprofit to help those families like me. When I started this, I didn't know where to start, what to ask, who to go to. I didn't know anything. And I want to be able to help those families because they're the same way. They're scared to speak up, but also, who do you go to for help there? You can't. And so I want to be able to tell their stories and help people remember that person, that they were loved and they mattered, and the families matter too. So hopefully I can do something with those families too.
Yeah. Because, like you said, especially like you're young, you don't know the system. We talk to so many families. They're like, we have no clue. There's no book on what to do if you have a loved one go missing or murdered and you literally have no law enforcement that's willing to do anything. What are the steps? Because you're literally flying blind.
Also, like in small towns where law enforcement does control the whole town, if there wasn't any back then, there isn't now resources to help victims' families process, get therapy, or help you find a lawyer or anything like that. There isn't anything there.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's almost like they want to keep it that way so you don't ask too many questions as well.
yes.
Ah, ow.
Where we stand now with Leon's case is just continuing to advocate, honestly, just again, pushing for answers, pushing for people to ask questions of these corrupt individuals. And hopefully someone will come forward. I know that right now there is a reward available,
Mhm.
expires in a year. I'm
Yes.
sorry, remind me. Okay.
But on May 16th of next year.
Okay. There is a $30,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest of whoever did this to Leon. So please keep that in mind. It's incentive at the very least.
You can be anonymous.
Yep. We will share your GoFundMe again. We're going to try to figure out another creative way to get some funds into your GoFundMe so that we can get a lawyer hired and at the very least ask questions about what evidence do they have? What is in Leon's box in the basement? Because that's likely where they store things that flood.
Right. They told me it was in the basement. When I called the sheriff's department, I spoke to the records keeper that told me they've done everything they can. She told me it was in the basement. She said she knows because she's looked at them, like periodically they bring the box out. And she said it's in the basement. But that's the only way, this is the only way I know how to keep Leon's memory alive. And I want people to know what an amazing person he was and that he's deeply missed every single day. And I want them to remember who he was and not just what happened to him, but also bring awareness of what happened.
Yeah, agreed. That's awesome what you're doing.
Thank you.
Are. Just by listening to our content, you too are advocating for justice for these families. Thank you for making a difference in their lives as well.
We want to share a few ways you can support us to continue our mission. You can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $5 per month, or a simple rate and review on your favorite podcast platform helps us get in front of someone who may know something.
We will continue to shed a light on the forgotten victims, untangle the webs of deceit, and examine the eerie coincidences that make these cases so compelling.
We believe that working together can affect change and create a world where victims are heard, justice is served, and communities are empowered to make a difference, no matter where or who they are.